by my children, some of them for me to make a tape of my prisoner of war days. So this I'm going to try to do. We'll get it on tape here. Maybe in future generations they might get some good out of this. So we'll go into it and see what would come of it. It was back in 1944, I believe. You'll have to forgive me if I don't get the dates right on this. Sometimes I can't remember them dates just exactly right. It was on September the 11th, and we was in France. We was taking a bridge over the Moselle River up in Metz and Nancy, France. And across this river, they sent scouts just before this, and they give the all clear sign, so it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So the captain, he decided that we'd take the other side, take the bridge, and that way we'd have a crossing for the troops the next day. So this we did with 3 rifle companies. This was with the 35th Division, that's what I was with, the division, the 35th, and the 134th Battalion. I was Company B of that battalion. These 3 rifle companies started to cross, and by the time we got organized going across, it was getting close to, sundown, something like that. We was going to cross this bridge, and I tell you, all hell broke loose on us. Oh, the men, it just slaughtered the men on this. This is a huge bridge, a long bridge. And there's just bodies laying all over this. They had us zeroed in. But somehow or another, with God's help, I got across that. I'll never know to this my dying day how I was lucky enough to get across. Me and my buddy, his name was Frankie Picer. And our objective was to take the hill on the far side of this bridge and hold that till morning. But we've lost a lot of men crossing this. So, but we advanced on forward, but the battle was getting terrific. It was heavy battle in there. And Frankie and I, we was out quite a little ways ahead, about 300 yards ahead, I guess. And we got orders to pull back, to regroup. We had to give up a position there because we fought hard for that ground. But we had orders, so we turned and went on back. On the way back, we got caught in a crossfire, machine guns. Oh man, it was terrible. And it got my buddy Frank, and he was too badly wounded. He told me to go ahead and go on back and leave him there, but I couldn't do this. I told him I was going to take him with me. So I picked him up and I took him back to the edge of this bridge. And there's a concrete abutment to this bridge, and I laid Frank in that. And by this time now it was getting dark. I suppose it's 10 o'clock at night. There's a lot of things going on between now and that, but I won't go into all this battle stuff. And they started throwing hand grenades in on us. And I was picking up these hand grenades, and I'd throw them back out, and boy, you didn't have much time. You had to do this fast, because you didn't have much time to get those things out of there. It was nip and tuck. But one of them went down in there, and I could not find this. I don't know whether Frankie put this under him or not to protect the rest of us. But anyway, it got Frank, it went off, and that finished him up. And this is where it wounded me. And a short time later, it was just hand-to-hand combat in this deal. And we run out of ammunition. We couldn't get support from the other side. And our commander, he told us it was time to surrender. Oh, Lord, I hated that. That's something I never thought about, ever thought about surrendering. But we had orders, and we had to. It was a hopeless case of trying. It had just been slaughtered because we didn't have any ammunition anymore to carry through. So this is the day I was taken prisoner, on September the 11th. And by this time it was about 4:30 or something like that in the morning. They marched us up between this canal and the river. There's a road there. And Lordy, I tell you, the German soldiers was laying dead on that just like flies. I thought sure they'd kill us when they got us back a little ways further. But they didn't. They took the wounded of us and put us in a little room there, and this is an aid station, I guess you'd call it. And we sat there. Being taken prisoner is a tremendous shock to you. Absolutely, I can't explain that. The terrible letdown it is to you. It's just absolutely a terrible shock. And all of the prisoners in there that was wounded, and also Germans that was wounded in there. They operated on us, took the shrapnel out. I witnessed them operate this operation, and they was cutting off legs, and amputating arms, legs, removing eyes. It was fantastic. You couldn't avoid seeing that stuff. You was right in there with it. And being in shock and all this, I tell you, I can't explain the things that was going through my mind. It was just a terrible shock to know you was taken prisoner or lost your freedom. But from here, they took us to another place. These Germans had captured us. It was a hotel, but they made it out kind of a hospital ward. They put us in there a couple of days, but we didn't get any treatment there. And we hadn't had any food. They just didn't feed us. And we was there 2 days in that place and they didn't feed us. And I witnessed the bombings, Americans coming in bombing. And Lordy, I thought sure they was going to hit us. Them bombs, I could see them coming right straight down, but they'd swerve off and they'd hit these locomotives, the engines. And boy, they's pinpoint bombing. That did our hearts some good to see this going on. And from here now, they took us and put us on railroad cars. They just packed us in the railroad car. And this car, it had a little bit of straw on the floor. There was no windows in it. And they locked the doors on us. And we went this way for days. I suppose it took 10 days for us to get from the day we was on that to when we reached our Stalag, or our prison camp. But there was no toilets in this thing. No buckets, no nothing. When you had to relieve yourself, you went to the corner and relieved yourself, and you couldn't throw it out. And oh, the terrible stench in this thing. It was just unbearable. Around this door, now there's a little crack, there's a crack around there where this door's shut. And this is the only way for us to get fresh air. And we'd take turns laying down here, and we'd put our face right up to that, and we'd take fresh air in that way. Then we'd rotate and let someone else, and ever so often when everybody had the chance, well, you'd start in again. This is the only way we got fresh air in that. It was horrible. Oh, you can't imagine. Everybody was wounded in this, and they was sick, running fevers. Some of them, oh, they were just begging for mercies, even for death. They wanted to get out all of it. It goes through your mind. Anything would be better than to be in a prisoner. From here, we went on this train, and it took us a few days, and we finally reached Berlin. But it took us a few days because these American bombing, boy, they was giving these railroads a tremendous pounding. So they would, once in a while, they'd blow a track out ahead of us. We'd have to backtrack, and re-switch and go another route. But eventually we reached Berlin, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And this was the only time they opened up the doors on this. I don't know why they opened them, but I guess they wanted us to see this or something. But we witnessed this bombing. The American, the English, and all, I guess, were bombing. And the sky was just full of planes. You could see the artillery going off the ack-ack up in there, hitting planes. They'd be a smoke, and some of them would be a spinning down. Some of them would explode. It was a terrible thing to witness that. And the destruction, oh, the massive destruction. You just cannot imagine this. I thought we would be killed at this railroad station. I just didn't think we'd get through this alive. I was prepared to die right there. But we went on, and we went to a place called Neubrandenburg, Germany. This is up in the northeast corner of Germany. It's about 30 miles from the Baltic Seas, the northeast corner. They stopped at this town called Neubrandenburg, and they opened up the boxcar door, and I looked out, and I seen a huge bunch of people there, and children. The children was in front of the people, the grown-ups. And then they had the German, bunch of German soldiers with police dogs. Well, they made us get off of this boxcar, out of the boxcar. By the way, on the way on this boxcar, we didn't get anything to eat. We got the only thing we had to eat. They issued us about 4 inches on a loaf of bread. This bread was this black bread made out of sawdust, potatoes and sawdust, and it was real heavy, hard bread, and about 2 inches or 3 inches of lunch meat. And when they gave this to us, we ate this right down because we was terrible hungry. And when it come noon, when we asked for more, or next meal, we asked for more food, and they said, well, you've already had your rations to last you 3 days. We went all that time, excepting we did get a cup of barley soup. And I was so sick I couldn't eat that barley soup. I just could not eat it. I gave it to the other guys. And I didn't care whether I made it or not. I was just so terribly sick. But reaching this railroad station where they unloaded us, they had these German soldiers and they had their police dogs. We had to line up in this line of police dogs, and we got all lined up there, and these kids started throwing rocks at us. They had rocks and sticks in their hand. They throwing rocks at us, beating us with sticks, and you try to protect yourself when they swing and hit you in the face and on the head and stuff. You'd have to throw your arm up, and if you did, them Germans would just literally club you with them rifles. They'd hit you with the butt of a rifle, and they didn't care where they hit you. But it's just human nature to try to protect yourself. And the people, they was angry. Oh, they was angry. They was waving their fists at us. They was spitting on us. Or just all kind of, I knew they was cursing us, but I couldn't understand them. But oh, they was angry people. And here we were, and the Germans would turn these police dogs on us also, and they'd let them nip us. And it was a terrible, humiliating thing to go through. A proud bunch of men as we were in our army, and be cut down to nothing. That's what it was, just you literally cut down to nothing. They destroyed your morale and everything. They just literally, they starved you down. They had to break you some way. And without food and water, they don't take long to be broke, but you have to hold on to your sanity. You can't let it get away. But we hobbled on through there. We had to almost carry one another through this thing. We just had our arms around one another, and we just holding one another up, and we had about 2 miles to go to this prison camp. But we made it through this beating with the people there at Neubrandenburg and reached the prison camp, and they lined us up out there, and they made us stand out there in the sunshine, and it was warm that afternoon. And finally they did come out. They didn't give us any water there, and they finally came out, and we had to get our Stalag number, our prisoner of war number. And my prison number was Ochten, Oxy, Oct, and Swansea. That's 88828. That's the way you say it in German. I guess I told you in English. Anyway, it's 88828 in English. It's hard for me to think of that, how to say that. But anyway, from here they put me in a little, I suppose it was a kind of an aid station place. It wasn't a hospital. I didn't get any medication there. And I just don't know why they put me in there. But the cell, I was in a cell there, and it was made out of chicken wire. Just a small cell, and it had a cot in it, but it wasn't a regular cot. It was made out of wood, and on top of this cot they nailed on chicken wire on that, and that's your springs for your bed. So you didn't have a mattress or anything. You just had to lay on that. I was in there for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days. And in this place there was some Frenchmen. These Frenchmen had been captured for a long time, and they was kind of knew the ropes around this place. And they got food a little. They knew how to get food in, and they went out and worked and snitched food, and got it in. One of these Frenchmen come over and asked me if I'd come over and have lunch with them. And I said, if they'll let me go over, I'll be happy to. I said, I'm about starved to death. I'm so hungry and haven't eaten and had water for 3 or 4 days now. So they got permission from the guard. For some reason, that guard let me go over there. And it was in the same barracks, so you couldn't get out of it. I went over there, and these Frenchmen, they wanted to know about the battle through France and stuff. And so there was some of them from St. Lo, and that's just a little ways off of the Omaha Beach there. And I told them, I said, well, I went right through St. Lo, and we demolished St. Lo. And they asked me about the trip through there, and I explained it to them best I could. They wanted to know where I was captured. I said, well, I was captured in France, or by Metz and Nancy, France, crossing the Moselle River. And they said, well, the war is almost over then. We didn't realize you had progressed that far. And I said, well, that's where I was captured. They should be further than that now. And they said, well, the war is about over. And I said, well, boy, I hope so, because I don't think I can stand this very much longer. And that's, I'll tell you, it threw me into, I don't know, a turmoil of some kind. And I got my nerves cracked on me, and I threw up this food. They had potatoes there for me to eat, and some bread and some tea. And I ate that, but I threw it all back up, and I felt so terrible about that, wasting that good food. And I needed it so bad, and it just all came back up. So they take me back to my cell. And next day he come back and he said, well, don't feel bad about this. He said, going through this, he said, it just made your nerves crack. And he said, it was just too much for you to handle. And he said, we didn't realize that. And he was apologizing and everything, but nothing he could do about it. So from here now, they put me up in the regular American camp. See, they had different sections for the British and the Americans and the Russians and just all the nationalities that fought in the war. Each country had a different section here. We was right beside the Russian section too. I never will forget one day, they had us attention. We was right close to this barbed wire partition here between the Russian and American. And an old Russian, oh, that poor man, he came up there, he just skin and bones. And he's motioned for his mouth if I had something to eat. I looked around and seen him, and I shook my head. I didn't have anything to eat. One bigger than another. He couldn't give him a thing. Not one single thing could a fellow give that poor man. He turned around, and as he walked away, he'd fall down, and he'd pull himself up, and he'd fall back down. Terrible. Oh, it was horrible. And it wasn't just one like that. That whole camp was just skin and bones now. And they put us in this barracks now. They boarded the windows up, and you didn't have any utensils to eat with. You had a tin can. That's all you had all through your stay, was just a tin can to eat with. And they'd bring soup to us. They'd bring it in 5-gallon buckets, just like you feed animals. And they'd dip you out a cup of soup. You look in this 5-gallon bucket, and it was just hardly anything in it. Maybe once in a while you'd see a little grain in it when they'd stir it. And the worms, oh, the worms and the little bugs in that, oh, just literally saturated with them. But the only complaint I guess the fellow would have that the worms wasn't big enough, because that's the only protein that was in it. And if you didn't eat this, you was out of luck. You just waited till the next day. So you had to just shut your eyes and go ahead and eat it. But some guys that hadn't got tin cans yet, and I've seen guys take their shoes off and drink their soup out of their shoe now. You had to have it or you just wouldn't get it. If you was lucky enough to get a tin can, and sooner or later I got my tin can, but we just drank out of our hands and our shoes and things like that, just any way to get the food. And in here, well, they give you a little water, but they turn this water on just maybe once a day, and they'd run it just for a few minutes, and everybody had to get a little bit of water. So you just run and you cup your hand and you caught a little water in that and you drank it, and then you step back and everybody just make a pass, and when everybody went, well, you started over again until they shut the water back off, and that's the way you got your water. You had to do it real fast, you know, but everybody needed a little bit of water. And now they issued us bread in here with a soup. And for 8 people, they give you a loaf of bread. This is this old black sawdust bread made out of potatoes and this sawdust. Now, I'm not kidding, it was sawdust is what it was, and potatoes. And for 8 people, they give you a loaf of bread to last for 2 days. And you had to take this bread, and you take turns cutting the bread. And the man that cut the bread, he was the last man to get a piece. He took the last piece. And the others, you rotated each day. You cut the bread. Each time you cut the bread, why then another guy took first to take the first pick. That's the way you went. And oh man, you had to measure that bread. You can't imagine what it is to lose just a grain of bread. You just sat there and you marked that thing. You had to weigh the middle again, the ends, and it was just fantastic. It took you 30 minutes to sit down and figure. Some guys are almost scared to cut it just for fear that they'd make a little mistake. And when you got done, everyone took a slice of bread and you took the last one. If you didn't cut it right, you got the smallest piece. And from here now, you go on a work detail. They put us out on a farm here one day. The first farm I worked on was on a cow beef farm. And you had to walk from the prison camp to the farm. And it's usually 3 to 5 miles is what it was. and they didn't feed you in the mornings. When you got back at night, you got that bowl of soup. And but all day long we'd pull these cow beats, and you had to hunch over there pulling those things, and then you lay them down, and they'd come with some kind of machine to pick them up. But on each corner of this field there's machine guns. They had you just zeroed in. And with no food, well, we'd get about halfway down this thing pulling these, and we'd take a big bite of this cow beef. Oh, it was woody, pussy, pethy stuff. And there was no taste to it hardly at all, but it had a little juice in it. And the rest of it was just like you took a mouthful of sawdust and ate wet sawdust. That's just kind of what it reminds you of. But we got done on this farm that day, and so next day they took us to another farm. It was early in the morning, and this old farmer was out doing his chores. Now, on this farm, the barn was attached to the house, and in this here barn, while they had that was attached to the house, they had some a couple calves in there. And the cows was out to another building there, and this farmer, he was done doing his chores, and this was real early in the morning. And so they locked us in there with the calves, and then they went in the other side. I know they went in to eat breakfast. And pretty soon here come that farmer, and he bought the milk out for the calves. It was, about so much milk in the bucket. And he set it in there, and boy, them calves, they run their noses down in that thing and went to work on that milk. That farmer walked out, and he locked that door, and boy, I grabbed that calf by the ears, and I lifted him up. I said, grab that bucket out of there. And some other guy, one of the other guys grabbed the other calf with it, and we took that milk away, and we drank that milk. Oh, lordy, that's terrible. But you had to do these things, you had to do it, or we wouldn't have survived it. With the slobbers and stuff running out of this calf's mouth, but we drank it anyway. It's terrible. It's terrible to tell these things, but I don't want to hide things. I want you to know exactly what we went through, what it was really like. There's no need to tell them this if you don't put the most of it out, and I can't put everything out the way it is. But anyway, them calves, it was a bellering, and that farmer walked out, and he said, what's the matter with the calves? Some of these Germans could talk pretty good English. And he looked, and we drank that milk, and you know, it spilled out of that corner, that milk bucket down. It run down, and he looked at me, and he said, did you drink that milk? And I said, no, I knew he had me, put his hand right on that. And I said, yes, we did. He said, ain't you ate breakfast? I said, we haven't ate breakfast. We eat at night when we go home. He said, I don't know how they expect you to work if they don't feed you. I said, well, that's the way we do it all the time. They don't feed us. And he just walked back in shaking his head. And they did bring us out a little a cup of barley soup apiece. Boy, that was a wonderful thing that he did that. And so that day we walked to a granary down there, and when we got done working that day, and the guards in this farm was off a ways talking. I think they was discussing the war. And we was right beside the granary, and this granary door was open. And they couldn't see us too well there, but we decided I told the guy, I said, let's unloosen our shoes, strings on our shoes here, and let's get in there and get us some malo. Let's just let us run down on our shoes. And we did this. We just worked our feet and let that stuff run down in, and then we got out and we tied our shoes up and buckled the top of them. And man, we walked back to town this way, 5 miles back to town. Oh, bloody murder. And you didn't dare stop. You just had to take it in the terrible pain. I wouldn't suggest anybody try to see what it feels like. It's terrible. But they didn't search us, our shoes and stuff. They searched you thoroughly when you went in there. And you couldn't get in with any kind of food. They knew it. And if they knew we took that, they'd probably shot us both, because that food was precious to the Germans. But we took it in there and we give it to a fella, and he was wounded. This guy was wounded and he couldn't work, so we let him do our cooking for us. We took our shoes off and we poured that in a can there. Excuse me. And our feet was bleeding, had blisters all over them. He said, don't let it worry you boys. He said, I'll wash it up. And he said, we'll have a good meal someday. But lo and behold, you know, the next day, they called us out. And this is the day that they put us on commando. This is a hard labor detail. And I have to stop here now and tell you about the time, the reason they put us out on this thing, they told me. They put me in solitary confinement. And they wanted information. I wouldn't give them information. I give them my name, rank, and serial number, and that's all you're required to do under the Geneva Convention. And I told them this, and oh, they got angry with me. They pound that table and they walk around there with their pistols in their hands and their clubs in their hands. But I wouldn't give them any more information. So they slammed me in a room there, and they said, put him in a room there, and he'll talk before we get done. So this is a room about 4 by 8, and it had a cot in it. And it had chicken wire on also, and that was your mattress. No pillows, no covers, no nothing. No water, and there was no latrine in it either. You just, another place you just went to the corner, and that was it. Oh, it was terrible in there. And it was dark, there was no windows in it. And I had to stay in there several days. And they had very little water they'd give me, and no food. I think for 3 days I was out without food there. And the last day they took me out of there, and I was so hungry and thirsty. They took me into place. They had a table all set. They had slices of lunch meat just laid out there so beautiful. Bread, cookies, a glass of wine, a brand new pack of American cigarettes. The old boy sitting across the table there, and he said, have a cigarette. And I said, no, I don't smoke. Oh, I wanted a cigarette so bad. I smoked, but we didn't get any cigarettes. He said, well, have a drink of wine. I said, no, I don't drink either. And I knew that I didn't dare take it because, boy, if I took that, then he would really pressure me hard on me for information. So I refused this stuff. Oh, man, I should have drank it. I tell you, your country requires or demands a lot of you. And if you're going to be part of it, you have to go through with it, I guess. We did anyway, and I'm not sorry. I'm not a bit sorry that for the things I did. But he said, well, let's eat this food up here. And he said, before we do, let's answer these questions here. And he said, we'll just have a real nice food here, this wine and this meat here, make the sandwiches, and then we're going to have a cigarette. Oh, man, I'll tell you. I said, no. I said, I'm not answering any questions. I'll give you my name, rank, and serial number, and that's all I'm required to do. Oh, that man flew mad. The fire was just flying out his eyes. He slammed his hand on that table, and then guys, they pulled the clubs out. They started working me over. I wouldn't give it to him. This one guy, he pulled out his pistol and he put it right up the side of my head, and he said, you're going to talk or else. I said, go ahead and shoot, because then you've got all the information you're going to get. I said, that's all I'm required to do is my name, rank, and serial number. Oh, you can't imagine. I can't explain it to you. I just can't explain the terrible ordeal that was. There's no explanation for it. You have to go through this. You had to live it in order to really understand the deep, deep down meaning of it. But anyway, they eventually let up on me. But in the other room, they was working another guy over. That poor guy was screaming at the top of his voice, I tell you. It was terrible. But they took me out of there, and they told me, he said, they was going to put me in on a commando, and he said, you'll work yourself to death there. He said, you will get no mercy. He said, all you had to do is answer these questions, and we had made it a little leaner, a little bit easier for you. But he said, if you're not answering the question, he said, that's where you're going to wind up. So they put me back in there for another day, and then they took me out, and they sent me up here to this camp, and then out on the commando. This commando was a work detail, and it was attached to the mother camp. Our regular prison camp was Stalag IIA at Neubrandenburg, Germany. Now this other one was the sister camp to it, as they called it, and this is where I was. But this is where they sent the men where I guess they couldn't get the information from. They put them on hard detail, hard labor. They put us on a railroad, working on the railroad, and on this railroad you had to bust rock all day long. And they didn't feed you all day long. You ate at night when you got back in. Your food at night was a cup of barley soup and a slice of bread, and that was it. But on here, why this work detail, you had to crush rock, beat rock all day long, put it down to little fine chunks, and then you had to pound this underneath the tracks to level up the rails. This is the way we spent our time in there. It was terrible. But I was one day I was so sick in there, we hadn't got over our wounds good yet. And I don't know, I come down with some kind of a terrible fever. And it is the morning, and it's the winter time, there's a dead of the winter, and there's a terrible blizzard on. And they had a bad winter that winter, and that year. I told the boys, I said, I can't get out of bed and go to work. I said, you guys go on. I said, if they're going to shoot me for it, I said, just let them go ahead. I said, I can't, there's no need of me getting out there and going trying this. And they said, well, let us talk to the guards and maybe we can get you out of work today. So I went out there and they said, no, he's going to go to work. They come in and they just pulled me out of bed, these American boys did, POWs. They wrapped a blanket around me, pinned it on me. Where they got the pin, I don't know, but some kind of pin there they put on me. And then they put this coat on me. There was a big old long captured surf coat. You looked like, it looked terrible in that thing. And we didn't have any overshoes or anything like that. We'd wrap our feet in sacks. Just wrapped with all we could get around in the thing just to try to keep warm. I had walked, I think it was 3 or 4 miles out here to where we worked, crushing this rock. And I got out there and I was crushing rock, and boy, this wind was blowing. It right straight out of the north, an awful blizzard. This such terrible blizzard come in. It'd been there all night, blowing and snowing, and it blew my coat up, and they seen this blanket underneath my coat. And man, they come over there and they grabbed me and they took that coat off of me and they jerked that blanket off. And the mumbling and jumbling going on there, and they was mad. My God, they was mad. I didn't understand what they was after. They took me and they stood me up there at attention facing into that wind, and I had to stand there for several hours. I think it was 3 hours I had to stand there. And I didn't dare move. Boy, they would have shot me. They told me. So they always had an interpreter there that relay their messages. My God, I tell you, I stood there and I just couldn't take it anymore. I wish I would have just dropped dead right there. It would have been a blessing right at the time. But I told the boys, I said, I can't do it any longer. I can't stay here any longer. Get me some kind of help. Make them let me go to work or do something. I just can't face this wind anymore like this. They talked to the guard for a few minutes there and explained why I had the blanket on me. I had the fever and I just tried to keep warm. And they thought I was going to try to escape, but that wasn't in the cards. We had orders from our government to the Red Cross not to escape. It was forbidden for us to escape. I don't know why they did that, but we had that in our mind before, but we hadn't had a chance yet to organize a good escape plan. But after that, we give up trying to even plan or think about an escape. But they told them that I wasn't going to do that. But they let me go back to work. They let me put my coat on, but they wouldn't let me put that blanket around there. But they did give me a blanket back in the evening there. And this is the way we went for days. But one day they took us into the railroad station, and we had to unload stoker coal. This is fine coal. We'd get in the middle of this coal and we'd work out, a pair of us, two POWs, and we'd work out the end. And we started early in the morning there and scoop this off. About 11 o'clock, I started coming at the end. This coal was kind of sloped down like that. I seen a piece of bologna sticking out there. And I took and I reached up there and I pulled that up. Man, a nice big old stick of bologna. And I reached up there and I found 5 pieces of that bologna. And I told that guy, I said, come over here and look and see what we got. And he came over and said, my Lord, he said, where did you get that? And I said, well, I dug it out of this coal here. And he said, well, let's try to sneak her into camp. And I said, why, you know you can't get into camp like that with that stuff. They search you every time you go in. They take everything. I said, let's call the guards up and go over it with them and see if we can't talk them out of a meal of it anyway. So I called the guard up and he come up and he said, where'd you get that? And I said, well, I dug it out of here. And he wouldn't believe me for a while. I told him, I said, that's where I got it. I said, you've been guarding me. I said, I've been right in here all the time. I didn't leave here. I said, can we have it? And he said, let me talk to these guards down here, the other guards. So he went and talked to the other guards, and he came up and he said, you guys can have it all but one stick. Give us one stick of it. Man, oh boy, that was wonderful. I tell you, that was the best eating we've had for a long time. In this prison camp here, why, they had a slip trench. And when the bombing would go on, well, they would let us run out there of an evening, you know, when we got off work. This one particular day, it was on a Sunday, and I don't know why we didn't go to work. There was some reason why they didn't take us to work there, but they didn't on that one Sunday. They was bombing. We run out in this, laid in this slip trench, and the bombers has gone over. Oh man, I tell you. And pretty soon I felt something hit me on the side of the head there, and I was almost afraid to move. I was afraid the bomb was going to hit me right between the eyes. And finally I reached back there and I brought out a great big potato. You can't believe this now. The biggest potato, a crispy potato. I said, hey boys, they're throwing taters down there on us. I said, here's a tater. They said, well, old Blochlinger back there is hallucinating. I said, no, boy, I got a potato here. I said, here, I'll toss it up. And I tossed it up and they said, look what that crazy guy's got. And I reached in that hole there, and you know, I pulled out a sack of potatoes out of that thing. You wouldn't believe it. And we got out of that thing. We was walking in there, and one of those guys said, Blochlinger, he said, you come up with the darndest thing. This makes twice now you come up with food. He said, the Lord's passing miracles on to you some reason. Now, he said, wherever you go, I want to be with you. He said, you come up with the darndest things. That's some strange things that happened. But there's another strange thing that happened to me, and I can't explain this here. One night when they was bombing, why, these guards, we'd made arrangements to, when they got real close, they'd open up the gate and they'd let us run out to the edge of town. And they told us not to try to escape because it would just be wasting our life. We'd get shot if we did, and we had our orders not to. So we agreed that if they'd let us out of there, well, we'd come back in. So one night they was bombing, and we grabbed the clothes we could, and I grabbed my pants and my shirt, and I was putting them on the run, and I didn't have my shoes. Got out there, and this is in the wintertime. Snow, I suppose the snow was a foot deep. We got out the edge of town there, and watching this bombing going on, that was just kind of like a message from home. And you know, my feet didn't get cold. I didn't freeze my feet at that time. I didn't, just wasn't cold. I could feel my feet, and I had good feeling in them. But that's strange that it didn't freeze them. But that's this strange thing that happened. But in this place we had a little stove, and you know, we didn't have any fire, no fire. We just huddled together, and that's the way we kept warm. We just took our blanket and just kind of huddled, and our own body heat. That's the way we kept warm. And right outside the camp there, along the fence, there was a freight engine there loaded with coal. This engine was with coal. And it's been straight and had holes. I guess it was out of commission, but been sitting there for a long time. And I was watching this thing, and I thought, boy, I'd like to have some of that coal. I asked one of the guards, and some of these guards talk pretty good English, you know. And I said, why not let me go over there and get some of that coal and keep warm with it? He said, well, let me ask these other guards. So he went and asked the guards, and he said, go ahead and get you some. So I said, well, can I take 2 guys with me? And you can see us there. I said, we'll take 2 guys and they can carry it in. He said, okay. He said, while you're up there, throw us down something too. So I got up there and I threw down some beautiful big old chunks of coal. We got done, we took that in, we stoked up a fire. Oh man, you talking about, you just can't imagine it, just the warmth into you. First fire we've had all winter there. We sat there with them old, and had some of those old fireside chats. I'll not forget one time there was a little Irishman in there. And he got up and he said, boys, he said, everybody's got the blues. He said, everybody just looks terrible. He said, I'm going to put on a little play here for you. This little old boy is only about, I don't know, 4.5 foot or something like that. I don't know how he got in the army. Every time we took a step, he had to take 3. And he used to cuss us. He said, don't go take the longest step. He said, you boys are walking. He said, I'm a running, trying to keep up. He was a comical little fellow. Anyway, he got up and said, I'm going to put on a little play. He said, I'm going to sing you a song, boys. Cheer this place up a little bit. And he started out, it was an Irish song. I don't know it all, but anyway, I can remember a line or 2 there. We'll make the Catholic blood run like water from Belfast low into the Irish Sea. That little rascal. And he said, hey, now, boys, he said, don't be getting mad at me. He said, some of you guys are getting mad. He said, I can see it in your eyes. He said, I'm not trying to make you mad. He said, I'm just putting on a play. He said, I want to just cheer you up a little bit. But that son of a gun, I tell you, that was comical. That changes the monotony for a little while, I'll tell you. And from here now, one day, they come in and they said, well, men, the war is almost over. He said, we have orders to set you free or take you back to the American lines. And whatever you want us to do, whatever you want to do, we'll do it. And we'll take you back and protect you from the SS troops. If you go along, they're liable to get you, and they'll kill you if they get you. If you want us to go with us, we'll take you under our protection, and we'll assure you freedom, your safety back to the American lines. So we voted, and we decided we'd better have them take us back. We didn't dare take any chance. You know, they gave orders to shoot all American prisoners, but for some reason or other, they didn't carry these orders out. And oh man, I tell you, it was. That was a terrible thing. I was sitting there with that death threat on you, and they told us they had orders to shoot the prisoners, and I thought, man, oh man, any minute they're going to do it. But they didn't. And but anyway, we had an old cart there, an old ox cart, and it had a couple staves along the side where you put your animal between and hitch it up. So we put our blankets on this, and the wounded, the guys that were really the worst wounded, we put on that. And this bunch that worked on the railroad, the ones that was in this little camp here now, and this the ones that went out with us. So we went, we started down the road, and we pulled this thing for, a day or so. Oh, I tell you, our legs was swelling up, our ankles was swelling, they was hurting, the joints was hurting. We were just so low, our food, we just haven't had any food to keep us alive, really. And, but along the way here somewhere, we found us a Red Cross parcel. I have no idea, I can't remember to this day where we got this thing. Whether the guards come up with it or something went and stole it for us or what. Anyway, in this was a chocolate bar, a fortified vitamin bar made out of chocolate. It was about so long, so wide. And we was going along there and went through a farmhouse there, and this old farmer had some oxen there. And we asked the guards if we could talk them out of an oxen. So we got to talking there, and we offered that old farmer there one of those candy bars. And of course, the German soldiers talking to him for quite a little while, and he gave us that oxen for that candy bar. We hitched that oxen up, and it was a cumbersome thing. It's a huge animal, big old white gray thing, whitish gray. It'd take a stride, man. It had a good big long stride, but man, it's so few and far between. And the Russians was right behind us. Boy, I tell you, you could hear the artillery from the Russian shells going off behind us there about a mile or so back. We had to just keep plugging away to keep ahead of them. And they finally getting so close, we had to unhitch this oxen. But the reason we unhitched it, we come across a horse that the German soldiers had worn out, and they just turned it loose on the road there. So we took and unhitched this old oxen, we put it in a farmer's pasture. I bet you did this. I'd just like to know what that farmer thought when he seen that oxen in there. But it'd come a good many miles there, so I don't suppose he ever found the owner of it. We hitched this horse up, and we drove it for about 3/4 of a day. That old horse just, boom, down he went. Just let out a big groan and a grunt, and that was the end of our horse. So we unhitched that one. Started pulling our wagon again. And we was so weak, we was cutting branches off trees, you know, make us walking canes to hold ourselves up, walking crutches, put underneath the arm just to hold the weight off our joints. We just wasn't used to this thing. Man, I just didn't think we'd survive it to get back to our American lines. And we didn't know how far it was to these American lines, but it was about 100 miles when it was all said and done to their line. But we pulled this cart on to another place there, and another farmhouse. And this was really a beautiful, well-kept farmhouse, painted up. It had a huge, long barn in this. And we was resting there a little bit, and we went down to this barn, and I tell you, that thing just had a line of thoroughbred horses in there. Man, they was beautiful horses. I asked one of the guards, I said, "Do you care if we steal a horse?" And he said, "No." He said, "If you can get one of them horses and get by with it," he said, "hop right to it." So by golly, me and another guy, we went down there, and the harness was there. We took that harness and the collar and put on there, and we harnessed that and bridled him, untied him and took him out there and hooked him up to our wagon. Started off, and boy, here come that old farmer out of that barn. His fist was waving in the air. He was cussing and screaming, and he ran up and grabbed that horse. Stood there, and he looked at us, and he's shaking his fist at us. And he cussing them guards and everything. And they had a big powwow there, the guards and him. Pretty soon that guard come over and said, "Boys, you might as well give it back." He said, he can't let it go. There's no way he can account for it, so we'll just have to let it go. Give it back. I said, "Well, tell the old boy them Russians are right behind. If we don't take this horse, they're going to take it anyhow. They're going to take them all." So he went and told that old boy that farmer, and he just shook his head. I guess he didn't care whether it was the Russians or us, but he just seemed to wait on the Russians or something. But anyway, we didn't get our horse, so we started pulling that cart again. It was muddy that day. It was raining, too. And there's a big valley here, and we met a huge bunch of German horse-drawn equipment coming towards us. And it was dark. by golly, it was dark. I suppose it was about 12 o'clock at this time. Them horses, on them German horses was falling down, and them Germans was a-whipping them horses. And you could hear them horses a-squalling and a-bellowing, and I tell you, it was that was a terrible, frightening thing to go through that. But we finally got to that. And we stopped at another farm place along the line here. We talked the guards into letting us rest a little bit. There was some sparrows. I heard some sparrows down there in that barn. I said to an old boy, I said, let's go, you and I go down there and check this barn out. So we went down there and they had some sparrow nests stuff around in there, and we dug in them sparrow nests and we got these little sparrows out, and the sparrow eggs, you know. And we ate those, and by gosh, you know, we didn't have any way to cook them, we just ate them raw, but that's things you had to do to stay alive. It's some of the things that we had to go through. It's terrible to think, but this is the way it was. I'm just telling it like it is. From there, where we went on a little further, and this countryside was just massed with people. Just the Germans and all the prisoners they turned loose were just heading for the American lines, and just a mass of people going. And along the road here, where we come along, an old boy sitting on a dead horse, and he had a big old X carved out of that horse, and he had a big chunk of horse meat in his hand. I looked at him, and he pointed at that, pointed at me, and I shook my head yes. I figured he wanted to know if I wanted something. I said I did. So he cut me off a slab of that raw horse meat. Man, I'll tell you, I took a big bite of that stuff, and I chewed on that. You think I could swallow that meat? I could not make myself do that. I could get the juice out of it, but I couldn't swallow the meat. I passed on to the other guys, and they had the same trouble. I don't know. I guess I don't know what it takes, how starved you had to get to eat the raw stuff, but we couldn't do it. We come to another farmhouse, and it was dark, and we was in terrible agony. I tell you, we just couldn't hardly take another step. It was just plain aggravation. We told them we had to stop and rest, and they said, well, we'll rest for an hour, but we've got to get up and go. And he said, the Russians are going to get us if we don't keep it going. And it was raining, and I was just hurting so bad, and I thought if I could just get in that barn and get out of this rain and get a good night's sleep, or a good hour's sleep or something, I'd feel better. So I proceeded to sneak in that barn, and I got in there, and pretty soon I hit something, and I went head first, and I landed right square on a bunch of German soldiers sleeping in that barn. Them guys letting out a war whoop, and all the language, I know they were cursing me, but I couldn't understand them. And I'll tell you, I eased out of that place. I slept out in the rain that night. But we rested there for a while, and so we got our old cart going again. Now on this cart, we'd take a turn once in a while, getting on it and resting. And everybody was pushing and having a crutch on the one arm, trying to keep the other side up. And man, I tell you, that was miserable. I wish I had a picture of that. You wouldn't believe that this all happened. You just would not believe it. The terrible sight that was. But we came to another farmhouse, and this is the only place that I seen any chickens. As these people moved through these farmhouses, they just stripped these. I don't know what they did with the cattle and stuff. They must have drove them ahead or something, but they just wasn't nothing on there. But on this place where the chickens was running out there, and we asked the guard, said, do you suppose they'd cook us a chicken? He said, I'll ask them. So he went and asked the old boy, and he said, yeah, he'd cook us chickens. So we caught 3 chickens there. And while they was frying those chickens, we sitting outside of that barn, or that house, and it was nice and warm then. Oh, we were so tired and in and hungry. And we just, I tell you, the food we had before this, we was eating grass and leaves. We was pulling the grass and leaves and eating that. And this way we stayed alive. And then little scrounging like the little birds and stuff and things that we could eat while we just, that's the way we made it. That's the way we survived that trip now. But pretty soon, along the road there was a Jeep. And this road wasn't very far from the house. And there's an American Jeep, and this guy stopped, and he hollered over and said, "Hey," he said, "you guys prisoner?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Are you American prisoner?" He said, "Sure are." And he said, "Boy," he said, "come on." He said, "You're free now." Oh my God, I tell you the things that went through my mind. I thought back, it's just like that whole world, it just a flash in your mind. It just, everything went through you. You thought back, how did I ever survive this anyway? It's an impossibility. Even the doctors say that you can't survive this without a supplement of food. And man, very little we get. I guess when they told me I was going to be worked to death or starved to death in this concentration camp, well, that's, they just about hit it right. But man, I tell you, it was close. When I got out of that place, I weighed 92 pounds. Just imagine that. Oh, I wasn't the only one. Everybody just lost weight, something terrible. But in this place, before I go any further, I want to talk about a guy that we didn't get any mail. And one day they called us out there in the yard and they said, "We got mail for you, come on out and line up out here." So I went out there and they had mail in a pile there, kind of like a little bonfire pile. Got out there and they took a match and struck a match to that and they burnt that up. My God, I'm so mad, but they couldn't do nothing but just stand there and watch. If you said one word, they'd have mowed you down. And but one guy did get a letter. He got a letter from a priest, and this is the only letter that we received in that camp now that we was in. And informing that his father passed away. And I tell you, this man, oh my God, he broke up. It was something terrible. He went out and went outside, and our restroom was outside in a little building there, kind of like the old-time buildings they had here on the farms and stuff. And he went out there, and he stayed there for quite a while, and I thought, I'd better go out and check on him. Oh, that man took that hard. I could understand his problem. And I went out there, and I hardly knew him. The man, he just looked like a different man. He just went to pieces, I tell you. And I said, "Come on, let's go back in." He said, "No." He said, "You go in." He said, "I'm going to commit suicide." And I said, "No, you're going to commit suicide." He said, "Hell, why not?" He said, "There ain't no God." He said, "You try to tell me there's a God that makes something like this happen when we're going through all of this. There ain't no God." I talked to him for quite a while, and he said, "I can't understand it." He said, "I just can't understand why the good Lord did something like this." I said, "Well, I'll tell you why. The only thing I can figure out, the only reason he gave you this problem is you're probably the only guy that could stood up under it." I said, "The rest of us probably couldn't have made it." I talked to him for some time, and I finally persuaded him not to do that, because I said, "What will your folks think at home?" I said, "My goodness, it would be terrible, a lot worse than to seeing your father die, to have you do something like that in here." I said, "We went through hell," and I said, "Let's work our way back out of it now." And he said, "Well, maybe you're right." He said, and he promised me he wouldn't do it. So, and he didn't. He did all right after that. But from on this here, when this American called us, he said, "Gentlemen," he said, or "boys," he said, "come on." He said, "We're going to the American lines." So we took the guys that the worst of us. I don't know which ones the worst, but the guys that just literally gave up. But we loaded them in that Jeep, and we took him to the. We told him, said, "Now go slow, and the rest of us will just hang on to the side of it and hold ourselves up this way." And this is the way he took us in. And oh, if that wasn't a terrible mess going through there. The German guards followed us on through there. They seen us going, they run, caught us, and they wanted to get through that line. And they did. They went through and they just disposed of them out there somewhere. I don't know, picked them up in a truck and took them to camp, I guess. But when we reached the line, them American boys, man, I tell you, they just, like long lost friends, they grabbed us, they did, and they just, you can't imagine the kindness, the hospitality. Oh man, I tell you, they asked us questions, they went over, they had to interrogate us. They couldn't believe it, they just could not believe it. A lot of them didn't realize yet what these prisoners went through in these camps. But eventually it all came out. But anyway, from here they took us back and they showered us and shaved us and gave us clothes. And, oh man, that was a wonderful feeling. Then they took us, and one evening, that evening, they took and they had a barbecue, and they took, there's 4 guys to a barbecue grill, and they barbecued their steak. They barbecued me a steak, and they had that set there on a plate and a bottle of beer. Man, I tell you, I sat down there, a big potato, and I sat down, oh, I took a bite of that meat, and that was the most delicious meat I ever tasted in my life. But you know, I took a couple swallows of beer, and I took 6 bites of that meat, and you know, I could not get any more of that down me. I just could not get any more down. They just begged me. They even cutting up the meat and had it on forks, and they was going to feed me, trying to feed me. I said, man, I just cannot get it down. I said, I'm so full, I just can't explain it, how full I am, but I'm just about to bust. About that time, a doctor came around. He said, my God, he said, you guys get that meat away from them guys. He said, you'll kill them deader than a doornail. I said, they're just not used to that. Their stomach is shriveled up so bad that they just cannot handle that. Just take it away from them. So that was the end of my barbecued steak there. From here, they took us to a hospital and a place in Lucky Strike, France. They put us in a place there, and they gave us, all we had was eggnog to eat, and they would feed us just a little bit every hour or so, and they just kept that up and then increased the amount each time, or each day, a little bit more. Finally, they got us so we could drink a whole canteen cup of eggnog, and we go out. Then they let us go out, and we could eat eggnog just whenever we wanted. Whenever we felt like we wanted eggnog, we'd eat it. We just drank that stuff. Oh man, just constantly drinking it. I tell you, we fattened up there. You would never believe it. I tell you, we really put on that. Just plain old eggnog, that's all we had. I often wondered in there what folks back home had on, what they thought happened to me. I didn't get any letters from home, and I don't think they got any from me. I think they got one later as I was about ready to be released, but I didn't get anything from home. And I had a brother killed in the war, and God, I didn't want them to go through that, thinking that I was dead. That bothered me so much. And another thing that bothered us so much, at that time, in them days, you was with your outfitter. You had to have some reason to know, and that worried us so bad that we was captured. We thought maybe we'd be court-martialed. This was heavy on my mind too. That not only mine, but all of them. We thought maybe we was going to be court-martialed for being captured, and it was just a terrible burden. There's just so many things that was on your mind that you couldn't, no explanation for them. Why we thought that, I don't know, but we just never dreamed it was going to be captured, I guess, and they never mentioned captures in our training. But this is about the end of the tape now, and we'll get criticism on this, but I don't care. The truth is the truth. It's like one of my great heroes said, Teddy Roosevelt. It isn't the critic that counts. It is the man who was in the midst of the battle, the man who witnessed the blood, the sweat, and the toil, and the tears with dirt on his face, standing in the breaches of the wall, waiting for the rescue. Theirs are the stories that should be told and heard. And another great hero, General George S. Patton, as he broke through the lines, rescued a prison camp. As he crawled off the tank, tears running down his eyes, he looked over that destituted men, starving men. He said, "Men," he said, "you have stood up to the test. You are now free. You may go forward from this day on and stand in your place in history among the heroes." And that's about all I've got to say. This picture here is a picture of a German prisoner of war, or it's American prisoner by the Germans. I just want to throw this in to let you know what the boys went through, the suffering, the pain, the starvation. This all happened. Many of the men went through this. Thought I'd throw that in so you would never forget. Prayer I want to put on here. It's written by a gentleman when we got our prisoner of war medals. They wanted to know if someone would make up a prayer that would be appropriate for the occasion, and this is what he came up with. As I squat here in this cold and lonely cell, a place even maybe you forgot, I wonder, am I in living hell? Am I alive or not? I think it's more than 10 years now since my friend left this place. I guess he's back home, wherever that is, among the human race. Forgive me, Lord, if I seem untrue to the values my parents taught, the thoughts of my family and country, those things for which I fought. As I endured the endless days that dragged on into months, I battled with my very being to hold back bitter tears. My children by now, they are no longer small, but now they're nearly grown. My poor wife, she's had that too. She's raised them all alone. I want to hold my darlings, to watch my children grow, to feel your presence, Lord, my faith in you to show. Bless me, Father, and take this life. Please let it end today. I wonder how they've listed me, a POW or an MIA. And here's another little paragraph here that I took that a prisoner of war wrote. This will kind of tie up the loose ends. You know what the burden that most of the prisoners are carrying. This pretty well sums it up. They bruised my body and tortured my soul. They stripped me of my dignity and denied me my humanity. They crippled my mind and crushed my spirit. But only you, America, can break my heart if I'm not rescued. I think this pretty much says it all, and I'll sign it off with this. And I thank you for your patience. If you enjoyed it, it wasn't a total loss.